has it been like 10 years that you've been making works similar, like in using these secondhand figurines?
So it's been over 10 years now. It was kind of a slow start. The first one I made was actually all the way back in 2008. Was the very first time I
Damn.
modified a figurine, right after I learned ceramics restoration. But then it wasn't something that I kept continued to pursue. I did a lot of work on paper, altered books, things like that. And and I um, and as I started finding figurines and thinking more about figurines, I started collecting and kind of seeing what was out there. And from there, it just sort of slowly built. So in the first probably, between 2008 and 2014, I made very few figurines and I had a relatively different practice. But yeah, as time went on, figurines sort of took over my life. And as I continued my restoration business, I started making more and more figurines, more and more elaborate series of figurines, and then now I've been doing these big sculptures, which are sort of like conglomerations of figurines. And so, yeah, it's been. I think at the beginning when I was doing it, I was very precious about what type of objects I used and where I got them. Over time, that's been less so. So I have a little bit more, I guess, grace with myself as far as what types of things I use than I did when I first began.
Can you elaborate on that more? What were you stuck up about? Not, was it things you didn't want to use?
Well, I was very insistent with myself that I would only use things that I personally found in thrift stores. I wouldn't, I only wanted to buy like the lowest brow thing, which when I did begin, that was also just an issue because I didn't have money to buy more expensive materials. And I was and I still am very involved in the thrifting process. I thrift all the time. I'm always looking for figurines. But now it doesn't matter if I find them or who finds them or if someone, people mail me figurines now, which is amazing. I find them in all kinds of different places. Other people find them for me. If there's something I need, I will buy them off eBay if I can find them and I know where they come from. Because eBay is a secondhand source. I think at the beginning I was very precious about like the reuse, and I still am. I still want everything to be reused, but I don't need to go find it myself. The story can kind of be for everyone, and I love having and using figurines that other people have given to me because then that makes the story just more complex
And then
of where I got things.
when it's not a money issue, what causes you to pass up a figurine?
So the figurines I like, and I say this often. Many contemporary figurines, the modeling of the less expensive figurines is not as good as it used to be. So things I call them like snowmen because they look just sort of like a big blob. They don't have arms and legs that stick out or anything like that. So when I'm hunting for figurines, what I'm really looking for is great detail. Like a paw that sticks out, or tails, or long legs, or even just a very like beautifully painted face. So like for instance, these Lefton rabbits you're showing now. So they're made by a company called Lefton. Lefton was a Japanese company that produced things through, I mean, for probably 40 or 50 years, all different types of figurines. But this particular rabbit, it comes in two forms, a sitting and standing rabbit. And the first one of these I found in a thrift store. But then I loved the style of it so much. I love how they're all differently painted in the beginning. Like this one you're showing now has a very, very pink nose. Whereas some of the other ones don't have that same feeling. And of course, you're looking at them as I've altered them all. But you can still see the subtle differences in the hand painting of the original artist, which I really love.
So this is a numbered series, which is a little different Do you have any? Do you have any other numbered series besides the White Rabbits?
No, I don't. And I think I had always, I have some other series that aren't numbered. Like there was, as you know, a set of horses. I have a series that I call hybrids that are birds with, instead of bird heads, they have flowers for heads. Um, and But for the white rabbits themselves, I think they became numbered because whenever you think about the white rabbit, well, the white rabbit one is like a mysterious thing, but it is also primarily used for animal testing.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like a scientific creature. And I liked the idea of numbering this series because I wanted it to be like very iterative. And I knew I was going to continue to use only those two specific forms over time.
Yeah.
And I see someone in the chat is asking if these are referencing genetic engineering, which they sort of are. The first piece I made was actually two little lambs. I turned it into a two-headed lamb. They were very cute. But when I was growing up, the cloning of Dolly the sheep was a huge thing. I think that happened in the late 90s. And what I was interested in was the fear surrounding the cloning of Dolly the sheep. Like, people thought everything would be mutated if we did any cloning at all, or if we mess with genetics, then, everything's gonna be freakish and horrible. And I kind of felt, I don't know, the way that fear mongering worked, I felt was very bizarre.
I mean,
And
growing up in Missouri, I forget how rural you were. I mean, do you think that it kind of like, was it a talk even more there in a different way because of like agriculture, like farm life, or is
um,
that? Mm,
so I did grow up in rural Missouri. I didn't grow up on a farm, but many people that I knew grew up on farms. And it was really, yeah, I think the way that I saw it as a kid, I was very into the Guinness Book of World Records. Uh, and so I think that in that book, a lot of the things you saw were these, like these animals that were born with two heads, or, so, four or six or eight legs or whatever. And I think that knowing about that, like that happens naturally. And it's happened for a long time. So being in a rural community where people are raising animals, I mean, I never knew anyone who had a two-headed calf or something like that,
yeah.
but it sort of, it would have been wonderful to know that. And I do think that I've always been interested in animals. I've always been interested in biology and different types of animals. And so it's sort of just a natural, that and the Guinness Book of World Records was sort of a natural thing for me.
You want to start with the biggest?
Yeah, which the white piece or the turtle?
No, I was we'll say the tallest. I think it's the biggest. Let's start with the weight of the world, and then we'll
Okay.
move on from there.
Yeah, so this piece, actually someone had asked a question on Instagram, which was before the talk, which was, what is one of the most surprising pieces you ever made? And I think that this was one of the most surprising pieces I ever made. I knew, so the turtle who sits on the bottom, this references, of course, the world turtle, the turtle that, that carries the entire world on its back. And I had that turtle for a long time. I would say that I bought that figurine. I found it in a thrift store. I don't remember which one. And I have probably kept it for 7 years. And I loved its expression on its face. And I knew it needed something special. I wanted it to be something special. And then I started thinking about building these bigger pieces. And over time, my collection of figurines has grown and grown, and I'm keeping all these parts and pieces. And then I'm also keeping figurines that I know wouldn't necessarily work for a smaller situation, or like a small sculpture. And so I had all these pieces I didn't really know what to do with, and other things like fruits and flowers and you know, just various bits and parts. And I was started thinking about how I could use them. And then I started thinking about the world's turtle and really wanted to build this thing. And I think in my head, um, I think in my head, I actually imagined it to be more like more spherical. But then as it grew, I had to figure out how to build it because I've never built anything that big before. And so as I was figuring out how to build it and kind of making the structure, it came together like sort of like building a stone wall where you have all these different shaped stones. And what I had was all these different shapes of figurines that I started to put together like different stones. And so it has a very small support structure in the bottom, probably from just 6 or 8 inches up from the turtle's back. And then otherwise it's just completely supported by, well, epoxy clay and some other 2-part epoxy, and then the ceramic figurines themselves. And for me, this piece was really special. I've said to people, I mean, this sounds a little hyperbolic, but it feels like you can't even look at it in a way because there's so much to look at. It's like you can't even see what's happening. I almost feel like you could do a scavenger hunt, like looking at this piece.
Yeah.
And
It's
I know, yeah, I know every moment in it.
really like you really
Yeah,
you feel like you still know it that well.
I
Like
mean,
here,
yeah,
the hand, one arm, there's one part of the lobster is an arm, and the
yeah,
other
like the
is this.
lobster with the arm on it, and then there's a little, and then there's like a chihuahua body with a bird head,
And but
and
this bird, it
um,
looks like did you? This bird looks like it doesn't have bird feet, or are they bird feet?
that, oh no, no bird feet. Uh, that's a little chihuahua body.
That got a bird head put on.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha. But as more of a puppet hand for the lobster.
Yeah, and so that particular, I've had that little piece of a Chihuahua body for a long time, like in a little box, and and so this was such a great opportunity for me to use every piece of sort of every like leftover little bit that I couldn't figure out another use for.
A little bit of
And there's
clearinghouse.
also yeah, yeah. And there was also a piece in there that a piece I made a long time ago that was not successful at all that I broke into pieces. There's some parts of a cow body in there. And parts of the cow body, or there's a sheep leg that's sticking out. Those are pieces of a piece that I didn't feel was successful. And so the weight of the world, it has a little bit of like destruction in it. Um, and and then also you know, just sort of like the chaos of every day. There's so much to see, but then there's also so many like precious little moments inside of it that I love, like the orange with the fishtail coming out of it. And there's lots of little details that I feel like you could look at this piece for forever.
Yeah, I
So
found it challenging to photograph because there were almost too many things to capture.
yeah,
And
it's
a lot of it you know, the dimensionality of it with the maximalism really just challenges your eye to put things together and start to discern things because it can be very overwhelming. It's a thing you have to take in over multiple viewings.
yeah, and I loved the way that I loved the way that as I was building it, it sort of became so like the Earth when it's spinning, it becomes like slightly oblong, like in reality, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Like it's being held together by gravity.
right, Right. And so it's sort of, it becomes, as it spins so fast, and it becomes sort of more of an ellipsoid instead of a sphere. And this shape sort of organically became more of like this ellipsoid. Also, many people have referenced to Christmas trees, specifically ceramic Midwestern Christmas trees that have these little plastic lights you put in them, and then you plug them in and they light
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
And it has sort of a similar form to that too, which I really loved because that type of thing has always been really precious to me.
yeah, yeah. Definitely that there's a tree form, which then would could almost remind you of a Paul McCarthy. Um,
Yes.
but yeah. So okay, so then we'll move on to biblical angel here.
Yeah.
And so where this there's a lot going on in this piece, it has like this beautiful simplicity to it too. Obviously, it's we're it's a figure and then just birds, and all of these birds are over here. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. This is a very this is the high gloss. There's glaze on these, and if we come back over here, all these birds are it's all matte. Did you paint some of these birds, or
No, so
besides?
something that I find really interesting about ceramic figurines, and I feel like over the years I've learned so much accidentally about ceramic figurines, and usually not why, but how they're produced. And traditionally, most birds are produced in the matte finish, which is the bisque, rather than the high gloss. And so all of these birds started out with a bisque um, finish, and I love to use original finishes when possible, because I just think it adds to the authenticity of how the work looks in the end. And in this particular piece, I've really been thinking more about. So like this was a Saint Francis statue. Of course, Saint Francis is the patron saint of animals. Um, and so when I found Saint Francis, you know, I was like, this is really going to be, this is really something. And I loved that St. Francis was white. He's just all completely white and also glossy. And so I wanted to put the contrast between those bisque birds that are sort of coming out of him, like the body of the saint is sort of like an icon, and then these birds are sort of flying out of him, or he's made of them. There's a couple of areas where there's like a bird nest with eggs in it, or like babies in it. And I think there's two different situations where there's nests and little birds. And so I had a couple of comments from people that said that it looked like St. Francis was getting destroyed by birds, but in this case, St. Francis is birds. Like he's a creature made completely of birds. And I've had, for a long time, I'd sort of envisioned a piece like this, making a piece like this with all these birds, but I couldn't figure out what the structure was for it, or like the sort of the base piece. And so when I found the St. Francis figurine, it all really came together for me as far as how I wanted how I wanted the piece to be. Just like a pile of alighting birds.
And yeah, there's when we've done stuff before, you've done a lot of horses, you've done a lot of cats. When I've seen birds in the past, a lot of them were often interspecies.
Yeah. So I always, I think a bird is always a good animal to combine with another animal, because so many birds are colorful and they're interesting, and they have, like wings and things like that. But for this one, I think keeping it all only birds, um,
Plus St.
it just,
Francis.
yeah, it's St. Francis. It just felt very right to me for it to be, um,
Also, Katya,
for,
thank you for the information.
it will be only birds. I just, yeah, I wanted it to be really focused on one particular animal. I think I didn't want to get too in the weeds with making a bunch of combinations like surrounding this idea of this like saint of birds. I wanted there to be a little more clarity there.
Cool. Yeah, that's incredible. Okay.
Yes. Something else, I'll say one more
Yeah,
thing that I love
yeah.
about that piece. So initially, so you can see at the bottom, there's a little tail sticking out of the cloak, and then there's another little pile of birds that are sort of at the bottom by his foot. Originally, I actually had a very distinct bird foot sticking out of the cloak, like a large one, like a St. Francis sized bird foot. And I ended up taking it away because it felt too on the nose. Like I didn't want St. Francis to feel like he's not like Big Bird under there.
Yeah.
He's just made of many, many, many small birds.
Good to know. Good to know. Sometimes, yeah, when you have a creature that's not quite human but takes a human form, you wonder what's under the costume or the cloak or the
Yeah, only more
yeah,
birds.
birds all the way down.
Yes.
Um, so let's come over here to Galaxy Brain, which I think is one of the most incredible pieces you've ever made. It's just still so stunning every time I come in here. Um, so, this piece kind of makes me think, I know you look at a lot of art and you come in when you're making pieces, you have aesthetic considerations, you have cultural considerations, philosophical considerations. I know you come at it a little bit with an art historical context. So how do you balance those, and create these works? Like, are they do you feel like some of those questions come to fore when you're making, or is that more like that's more embedded in your in your, in you and your intuition and makes the piece that's sort of bringing some of those things along?
I think often, um, well, I'm always thinking, so that's a thing.
Oh,
But
good.
I think that for this particular piece, the way it came together was the way my work often operates is I find one thing that like sparks a whole idea. And that's how this particular piece came together. I started last year. I started making some pieces that were all white. So I think there's actually the first one I did was in 2023, I believe, and then I made three more last year. And so had started working with this more monochromatic concept for some of the work, and to add some complexity and be less straightforward with how the figurines looked. But with this one, I wanted to I was going to make a monochromatic piece, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And I went to a thrift store and I found that head that is the base. And when I found it, I just immediately knew what I wanted it to be. I
Have you had another head like that before?
No. I actually do. There's a little one behind me.
Okay.
She's not all white,
Okay.
but you can you can see her behind my shoulder there. But yeah, I've never found a bust like that before, or maybe if I had in the past, I didn't buy it because it didn't strike me. But this particular one really struck me, and I knew immediately what I wanted it to be. And the title Galaxy Brain actually just references a meme,
Yeah.
which if people have seen the meme, it kind of starts out like you learn one thing, and there's this one tiny spark in your brain, and then you learn another thing and it's bigger, and then it gets bigger, and then finally your sort of head just explodes
Yeah.
with like ideas.
Yeah. And then
Um,
as it developed, it went into all different directions, like political things where it'd be like, oh, sort of like, yeah, just sort of people use it for housing, for
yeah,
taxes, anything. Imagine like then, but if you really want equity in this area, boom, then it's the Galaxy Brain version.
exactly. And so I knew I wanted it to be like that explosive feeling. I also wanted it to reference like um, like big hair and like ladies' hair and like bouffants and those like the wigs of the past and sort of how people used to have and well still do at times like these giant enormous
Yeah.
hairstyles that are kind of hilarious. But as I was building it and thinking about Galaxy Brain and putting it all together, what I sort of came to realize one day when I was looking at it, probably because it is made up of all figurines and my life is basically figurines, um, I, I realized I was like, oh, this is me. I'm making myself. Like, this is what my brain looks and feels like a lot of the
Well,
time.
yeah, well, in your early checklist you sent to me after Galaxy Brain, it said in parentheses self-portrait, and I guess you didn't want to make it like maybe again on the nose about it, so you took that part out of the title. But I mean, you must say like it's definitely you could have been the subject of this person who made this the bust. It's not totally on the nose, but it's actually a pretty good stand-in for you.
Yeah, yeah. I thought she and just the way as I was building her and seeing all the different pieces come together and then thinking about all the little moments that are involved and then also a particular issue with this one was of course balance. I mean she's now bolted to a stand so she won't fall over. But early on when I was making her, I had to cut off the top section of her head. She had like a little bun on the back of her head, and I cut that off and then started adding things. But as you add, you have to do it in a very particular way so the piece doesn't fall over. And it was coming together. It came together very organically. And interestingly, in this piece, or interestingly for me, I inadvertently built it to where there are more cream colored things on the back side and more brighter whites on the front side.
Yeah,
Um,
it kind of goes white to her right, and then yeah, then around her other temple it starts to turn cream.
yeah, and that
Exactly
wasn't
bland,
really
or
yeah, it wasn't really intentional. It just that's sort of how the pieces like I think with the work is largely just like collage, three-dimensional collage, and the pieces sort of know where they want to be, or they sort of tell you where they want to be when you're making them. And so, and I one day looked and I was like, oh, I've organized. It's organized itself by colors of whites. And then I did add some of the pieces actually had gold embellishments on them um, when I got them, but then for this one I wanted to add a little bit more gold on other pieces just to give it some highlights. So I did add the gold. But this was a super fun. It was a super fun piece to make, and I feel like it's elegant and it has humor and it sort of encapsulates like what the making process is like for me. Um,
yeah, it's incredible, incredible. So let's see. We could maybe take what do you want to look at next, Deborah? Do you want to look at the slightly human, or would you like to
yeah, let's
look
look
at
at the
your
slightly
night
human. Well,
creatures? Okay.
let's do slightly human, and then we can look at night creatures.
Okay.
Um, and so uh, the the slightly human series. So for this show, I knew I have the three large pieces, and I wanted to do just a small series of sculptures. And for me, the larger works, I know that there's still a lot of like humor and like whimsy and whatnot in those, but I wanted to just make some works that were very light and funny. And I think that the thing something I think about kind of quite often is how you can tell the same joke over and over again and it can still be funny, depending on who you're with or what you're talking about. And so I had made the owl with the arms, the one that you said looks like it's in a too tight of a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so I had made that one last year, and she was by herself. And then I started, looking at what figurines I had and thinking about, a kind of a small, more straightforward series that I wanted to make. And I started I don't often collect human figurines. Usually the way I get human figurines is people give them to me. And so I have all these human figurines. I'm not terribly interested in them, but I have a big box of them. So I started digging through and realizing I had like all these really lovely hands. And there is something just inevitably hilarious about putting arms on a horse. Or the lion, and I love the posturing, the way that it changes the personality of the animal, like based on how the hands are set up. I really love that, and I think it's very funny. And I just wanted people to really just be able to like share in these humorous moments. I also like how the arms don't quite fit. They're often too long or too short or like a weird shape.
Yeah.
And
This one makes me feel like a puppet show where there's like a toy theater puppet show where there's like a plastic arm that's like petting something in a really creepy way.
yeah, yeah, I can definitely see that. And like that, that one in particular was funny too because I don't, the squirrel had a weird foot, so I ended up having to put a human foot on the baby squirrel. And then it's very difficult to see, but the baby squirrel also has a little cookie in its hand, so it's getting kind of scolded by its parent squirrel. Uh, and yeah, these are just really straightforwardly humorous for me.
Others. This narrative is confusing me a little bit.
The,
I feel
the
like sometimes the fish, when you're from a distance, they can almost look like they're holding knives or
oh yeah,
weapons. And so
yeah. So
and then this one guy who's got the hand for a head, but it looks like they're almost on the run in like an almost like, sort of ridiculous way, as if it's like posing for Band on the Run album cover.
they're sort of having like a dance party and I just was imagining, I mean, penguins love fish, and if penguins had arms they would still catch fish. And so they're just, and they have like nice big arms, so they're just really grasping those fish. And the little penguin, I initially considered putting arms on the little penguin, but it had a really weird looking head. Uh, and I didn't like it. And so, I could have put a different head on it, but then I was just like, in the world I live in, and like in the strange world of the show, two penguins with arms have a baby penguin that just has an arm for a head. Um,
And
and
obviously you do this all the time, but and we're going to go over and take a look at the dogs. So, but are there times when you find a little uncomfortable that you're like, I was when you were describing like taking off the galaxy brain woman's head, I can in my head I was imagining kind of like like removing a skull cap for a surgery, and it just are there times when it does feel a little like as if you're a torturer?
I sometimes will tell things I'm sorry when I'm cutting their legs off or whatever. Like, sorry guys. But usually I I feel like I remedy things fast enough that that I can avoid that feeling for the most part. I mean, I think in the world of in the world of like mad science, science fiction that I sort of dwell in for art. That that's sort of what they all do. You know, I think I feel like I'm on a path to like put things right, which is maybe the maybe, maybe a strange way to look at it. But I don't feel like I don't know. I'm not concerned. I feel relatively unconcerned about damaging the figurines because I know that they're going to become something so much more interesting. And occasionally, I mean, I do. All that said, I do have some things that it takes me a long time to cut up or use because I love them so much the way they are. Or or I don't want to ruin the thing that I love about them. Like for instance, you had sent me a box of figurines earlier this year, and there was a lot of cats. And there's one that I absolutely love that has these gigantic, just black pools for eyes. And the head is amazing. And I'll do something with it someday, but it hasn't found the right
Does
thing.
that when
And so I
you have one like that, does that mean it's gonna be in your studio for a while? Like, are you like is it looking at you for a while, like for a few years?
So I put some things sit out and actively look at me. What I do normally is when I get new things, they all sit out for a while, and then the studio gets too full and you can't see anything. And so then I'll put everything away into bins, which I can show you guys around later.
Oh yeah, yeah. We
And
yeah, we should yeah, good.
yeah. And so so once I put everything into bins, I still usually have a pretty good memory of what I have and what I've bought. And so, you know, I'll be in the thrift store later and it'll just click with me. I'll see something. I'll be like, this is a perfect match for this other
Yeah.
thing I already have. And if that doesn't happen, then then I'll get things out again. I'll start emptying my bins, or if I'm like looking for
Yeah.
ideas, I'll start getting tons of things out and
It's
seeing
like
sort of like
dumping out
what.
the Legos and
Yeah.
start building. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at this last series before we get a little tour of your studio. So these are we'll get close into them for in a minute, but these are thrifted plates that you painted with baked enamel paints. So which means you're baking them in your own oven afterwards to set the the paint. Similarly, like a home version of like the baked enamel that would be put on metal signs
Yeah.
that would hang around outside and stuff like that. So you had mentioned had you made plates like this before? I know you said that you had been doing some drawings on paper, and I don't know what exactly you described it as, being very annoyed or something like that. And you're like, I have to do this different. I have to, I need, and obviously it made you run to what you're used to, which is a thing that already was something.
Yeah, so I don't draw a lot. And or you know, usually when I have ideas for things, if I draw something in my notebook or my little book where I write things down, it's usually an undiscernible shape, or I know what it is, but it doesn't make sense to anybody else. And I was sort of looking for a way to, I guess, get away from figurines and think about something else. And so I started drawing um, at the beginning of 2023, and I thought, you know, New Year's resolutions or whatever. I thought, okay, I'm gonna do a drawing every week or something like that. And I was doing pencil on paper or pen on paper, and I just didn't like doing it. And I gave up after about 2 months. I think maybe I had fifteen drawings or something like that. And then when the beginning of 2024 rolled around, I found the sketchbook that I'd been working in, and I started looking at some of the drawings, and I really liked them, but I didn't want to draw on paper because I didn't like how it was feeling, and it felt something about it felt tedious. I don't know. I can't. It was just like a mostly a tactility thing that I didn't like. And so I started thinking about other ways to like create these images. And then I started thinking about China painting. And so China painting was a hobby that was really popular for women in post-war, like after World War II was over, and all the women who had been working at jobs, they were like, hey, you guys go back to your houses and like be homemakers. We don't need you in jobs anymore. The jobs are for men. And so like women went home, women got bored, women did hobbies. And one of those hobbies was like casting ceramics, like the figurines that I use in that work. But then a second hobby was doing China painting. And they could, a company would send you a kit with these paints, and then you could bake them in your oven. And yeah, and so I started thinking about China paints, and it's like, well, maybe I'll try China paints. And so I went and bought some, and then I found out they have pens. And there's so many different plates in the thrift store. And I guess I loved the variety of the plates. Like there's so many different ones and they're all mismatched. And so it was like a joy for me to go to the thrift store and find the plates. And it was, and the way the China paint applied to the surface of the plate felt so much more right to me. It didn't feel weird and annoying like a pencil. And there's also like little, like you can't, the paint sets up pretty quickly. Like you can scrape it off with a X-Acto knife, but basically once you put it down, it takes just a minute to dry and then it's there. Unless you scrape it off and then, and so it was really hard. This was a way for me to not be precious and try to just draw things without thinking. Because so much of the other work I do has to be really calculated, and done like really precisely and very right. Where with this is meant to be more loose. And it was also, they're called night creatures because they were primarily drawings that I was doing at night, when I got home from the studio. So I'd like sit on my couch with my little like book light and my little China pens and paints and paint plates.
Paint plate.
Yeah. And
Just one more thing here to when there's no figurines at the thrift store. Now there's now there's plates to look for too.
it's true, and it's been interesting. I think moving. I've lived in Seattle now for about 2.5 years, and the availability of things in the thrift store is so much different than what was happening in LA.
I imagine.
So, as I was as in LA, I had gotten really attracted to like stuffed animals, and using a lot of those in my work. And then in coming to Seattle, there's just not as many of that type of thing. And so whenever I go to the thrift store, I do hit the figurines section first, but I always look through the rest of the store to see what's around. And it happened that plates,
Yeah.
plates were around. and
Speaking of stuffed animals and plush, if anybody wants to see her last solo show, which had a lot of plush material and along with ceramics and modified ceramic works, our website, if you go to past exhibitions, you can see her last show that was from what was that? Was that 2021? Anyway,
yeah, it was very December
yeah, yeah, yeah.
2021.
So
Yeah.
so that was in the upstairs exhibition space on the 10th floor. So, but take a look at a few more of these. Love this little guy.
Yeah, it's been interesting too with the plates to see which plates people responded to. I know when I was installing them, you kept telling me I didn't have to put in every single plate that I brought, but I did it because I wanted to, and then even when I was doing a layout for them, it was even interesting to me to kind of see what was happening in my own mind because there's like repetitive themes that occurred that I didn't necessarily intend. And I don't know, I find that really interesting. So, I think with any any show, it's sort of a study of yourself as much as it is a study of um, something else.
Um, so, you want to move to and give a little tour of your studio?
Yeah, let me flip my camera here. I'm going to get it out of its little holder. So let's see. Let's find a good place to start looking. Um, so this is this is my studio. I'm going to just give a little overview here. Um, it is in relative working order. It's a little less organized than it is sometimes, but I can show you guys here. So I'm working on right now another white rabbit situation. This one will be a little different. But so this is a mirror that will have white rabbits surrounding it. And then I found this tiny Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And so Alice will be the top point of the mirror because her life was consumed by white rabbits. And then also you have the looking glass, which I kind of loved. And I feel like I may do a drawing on the mirror to be determined. And then just the other day, when I was getting out all the rabbits and thinking about the mirror, I started making this little table, which has a rabbit body on the bottom and then a pedestal and a mirror on the top. But what it will become is it will have rabbits all underneath. And so you can see all the white rabbits I've collected here. There's some little ones in here. And so I'm on the lookout for white rabbits. And then on to the left of that here, this conglomeration of things, of all these different figurines, will become one large pastel piece. And I haven't quite figured out how that's I haven't quite figured out how that's going to form itself yet. I think maybe this parrot guy is going to be the base. But I have all these different types of animals I'm going to use. So I think it'll have a bit of a similar vibe as Weight of the World did. Probably not as exponential. Uh, but yeah, so this is a beginning stage of a large piece, which is literally just a very large pile of figurines.
Yeah.
Um, there's a couple. Oh, here's a plush piece
Yeah. That was from the last show.
from the last show I did with you. And then this is sort of another situation of me finding something that I love in a thrift store because I was just milling around in there. So this whole house is a frame. And then it was a picture frame. And I was like, oh, a picture frame that looks like a house. Amazing. And now there's horses in it. I'm not sure why, but it seemed right to me. And then I've also just been collecting these like little wooden shelves with hearts for, I think, girls who grew up in the Midwest. A little shelf with a heart was very pervasive in rooms, in bedrooms across the Midwest. And I've been collecting these. Right now I'm doing little angel cat figurines. I don't know if these will live on these heart shelves forever or not, but it's mainly just me collecting the shelves. A precarious pile of white things that I built today, thinking about new sculptures there. And then I will show you, here's another collection of white things that will become something. And I will also show you how I keep my collections.
Oh my. Your collection, it's getting bigger.
I don't know if it is or not. And this is quite organized right now. This is all full of miniature stuff, but usually I have them organized. So like this is all dogs. So that bin is full of dogs. And so whenever I need a dog, I can just look in there. Ooh, there's that cat that I was talking about. This is my cat bin. You can barely see in there because I can't open the lid. But I do want to show you this
Oh yeah,
wonderful
yeah,
cat
yeah,
with its black pool eyes.
yeah, yeah. You pointed that out immediately when I was like, should I get these for you?
I love her so much. She's so wonderful. And
Her ears are out of proportion.
yeah, and I this is another thing I always love about finding these figurines. Like their imperfections are what make them amazing. And it makes me so happy. Um, And then let's see, a couple of other just things I've started working on, since I just had a show, I'm just in the starting process again for work. But I found this large dragon that a kid painted at a paint your own pottery place. You can tell by the quality of the painting. But I've gotten out all my large heads. I was thinking about making a hydra,
Hmm.
multi-headed dragon creature. We'll see what happens. Um, and then I I found this lamp. It's a TV lamp.
Of
If
course.
anybody knows, yeah, I was like, if anybody knows what those are. And then, I was just kind of fooling around with it the other day. So when I'm in sort of fooling around stage with these things, I just hot glue them together. So I've put these are praying hands that I separated and added. And then I found this head a few weeks ago that I just really liked. Um, and
It's a little disturbing.
you know, well, but it's the whole Apollo and Daphne, where the myth where Daphne turns
Yeah,
into the laurel
yeah, of
tree.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
know, we'll see. I mean,
yeah,
who
yeah.
knows what will happen?
Yeah. It's the fact that it's not gothic. It's more. It's she looks like yeah, she looks like 1930 Midwest um version of a Daphne.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that I've always loved, I mean, I think everybody knows it, but that Bernini sculpture of Apollo and Daphne is just like it's just stuck in my mind forever. And I love and so I love being able to like keep drawing back to that idea of um, Daphne became safe because she was turned into a tree. Like she was being chased by Apollo, and in order to be saved, Zeus turned her into a tree. And I think that's I don't know. I come back to that a lot. Like the way to be safe is become a tree.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's very relevant this year, and then almost any year, obviously. But it's so, and then so, and the hands are so weird because they do feel like a bit like gloved hands in a way, even though
They
they're,
are, yeah,
there's a
they
bit of a
are.
like gloved cover feel.
They are also kind of weird hands. They were on top of a Bible. I had to knock them off. Uh, a Bible with a music box in it that played Rock of Ages. If anyone had to go to church a lot, they'll know that song. And so they're a little bit masculine. I don't know. Like this is still an idea
Yeah,
piece. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
here's some little guys that I've been working on. This piece, I don't know if this person is watching, but I had a request from someone who has a French bulldog named Monkey. And so this is a French bulldog with it's a chimpanzee body, technically not a monkey. But I just started working on that. And then we have three little ducks here combined with rabbits. And I think that I don't know, I kind of left some extra feet out here. So I think they still are in need of some parts. Um, and then the last thing I'll show you is these weird critters who I just started putting together. This one's going to fall over. Um, so I had two elephants, two birds, and two fish. And I wanted to use all the parts. So that's the first one. That's the second one. And then we'll see, that guy won't stand up, but I'll hold him up. There's the third one. And then when it got hot briefly, they were stuck together with like low temp hot glue. So the fourth one collapsed, but there's its pieces. And, and then just real quick for anybody who is curious about like materials, this will be another long-nosed dog. And so this is all, usually I cut pieces apart and do the blends. But this one, this is epoxy clay where I made the long nose. And then there's the original dog nose here on the end. And so
Yeah, you seem
eventually
to use
that'll,
those epoxies for like very long appendages. Like,
yeah. Yeah, so anything where I need to build a big area or like, just build something I don't have access to, I'll use the epoxy clay. And then once this is like painted and sealed and polished, it'll look exactly like the ceramic. So, um, and
um,
that's pretty much my studio.
yeah. And so, and if anybody wants to, if you look back on her Instagram, there will be times when you can see some videos of her actually working and making pieces. So if you're curious more about that, you can kind of scroll a little bit through and you can find her torturing her little loved ones.
Right.
Um,
And I'll show people one more thing because everyone always asks. This is the cutting bit that I use to cut ceramics. Uh, it's a
the key
Dremel
to it
cutting bit.
all.
Yeah. If you want to cut up ceramics, you need one of these. It does not always go well, so don't expect it to.
And we've got 23 people on here. We'll wrap it up in a couple minutes, but are there any questions from the audience?
Oh, someone did ask me what my favorite animal was, and so I will answer that question while other people type things if they want. My favorite animal, as of this moment, is the okapi. Um, the okapi is a relative of the giraffe. It also has a very long prehensile tongue, which is awesome. They live in like rainforests. They're very solitary, and um, yeah, they have like a stripy. They kind of look like part zebra, part horse. They don't have a long neck, but they have like a giraffe sense to them, and they're just like really soft and beautiful, and I love them. Let's see. I saw somebody ask.
Some
Let's see if I can scroll.
somebody asked about ever remaking a figure like using clay, etc. So
Um,
obviously I know that you don't work with clay,
yeah, I
and sometimes
people.
have like we'll make disgusting faces thinking about clay.
Yeah, I'm always talking bad about clay for people who, I mean, for myself. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
Me and the material clay do not work well together. I do occasionally. I will occasionally do a mold of something like a foot or an ear, and but then I'll cast those in resin. I've never tried to remake something start to finish, and a lot of the reason why is because the thing I love about these figurines is that they were made by someone else and they have the sense of someone else in them. Um, and when you make something from scratch, there isn't anybody else there. Um, and so that's kind of what I love about it. Is there's always like this hint of somebody else
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
being inside
And,
the painting of the work.
well, that's also so. When you say someone in there, it almost sounds it almost sounds more costume like, that there's like another soul underneath the surface of this creature in a way, which does remind me of the photographic work you did for the last show, and also reminds me of some of the conversations we had in the first time I showed you during the group show of Stuck Together, where and all three of you did have there. There's a lot of sort of these what's in these things and the combining of things together.
Yeah, I think that I'm really, I, I don't know. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I think like a object has like a soul inside of it, but I think that all objects objects that were made by someone's hands have a sense of that person in them. Um, and I sort of I think see myself as a person who's like remaking the world with what the world already is, rather than starting from scratch. And so yeah, and so I'm sort of yeah, like I'm the wizard behind, it's like the Wizard of Oz. I'm like the guy behind the curtain. Um, and in the small figurines, the ones that I make to be perfect, to look like they were born that way, that's what it is. I'm the wizard. What I do is supposed to be sort of invisible. It's supposed to be like uncanny and make you believe that that this was just how the world was supposed to be.
Mm.
Um,
Oh,
and I see someone has. Oh,
I see
go
a
ahead.
question. I see a question. It's just going back to sort of more technique. They asked about how you join the pieces. How do you
Yeah.
epoxy your works together?
Yeah. So I use a couple different things. I use there's a two-part epoxy here. I actually don't like this brand, don't buy it. But so if the bonds are really close together, I'll use just a regular two-part epoxy like this. And then otherwise, I use epoxy clay. This is comes in two parts,
Is that
a
something you
hardener and
use more for fill,
yeah, I use this for fill.
for
It also has
smoothing, like
some.
the yeah
Mhm.
after the epoxy's dried?
Yeah, it has some adhesion to it as
Gotcha.
well, so you can
Mhm.
actually stick pieces together with it. Um, and so that's primarily what I use. Sometimes I'll do a fill with the epoxy clay, and then once that's dry, I'll break it apart and add additional like liquid two-part epoxy to make sure the bonds are strong and that the piece will stay together. Um, just due to the way adhesives work. um,
Martian, you touched a little bit on it, but this is worded a little bit differently. Martian was asking who if any of you didn't know, the first time I exhibited Deborah's work, it was a three-person show with Simone Gad, who's an artist who inaugurated this space in the spring with her first posthumous exhibition, and Martian was the third artist in the show with the two of them. And but Martian was asking what was your relationship with figurines like prior to cutting them up?
Oh, so I mean, like I grew up with figurines. I grew up in a Midwestern household, so we had figurines. And actually, I can show you my very important collection of cats that live in my studio. Um, the cat on the far left, she's up too high for you to really see it well, but this was a mass produced mold earlier when I was talking about women having to go do hobbies because they didn't get to have jobs anymore. Mass produced molds were really popular, and a lot of women, ran pottery shops. And so my grandma's sister had a pottery shop. And so my grandma poured that cat, that mass produced mold. And then this one has actually purple plastic eyes she put in. That cat lived at my grandparents' house. It lived under the grandfather clock. My grandma died when I was 5, but I always remembered that cat. And so, and so then when my grandpa was getting ready to move, I wanted the cat, so I got her. And then I've gotten 3 more cats that I've found in thrift stores for the other 3 states that I've lived in. So this one's from Missouri, this one's from Washington, that one's from Texas, and the one on the end is from California. Um, and so, yeah, like figurines have always been in my life. Um, not as like the china cabinet type that you're not allowed to touch at all. Usually in our household, we got out figurines for different holidays. Like we had lots of Christmas stuff. We had lots of figurines we got out for like Easter bunnies, little ducks and things like that. And I always just loved them. And I collected miniatures as a kid. And I can show you. I'll show you my very very oh, I can't show you my very special small cat because it is put away at the moment, which is too bad. But I have a very tiny miniature cat I love very much that is very special to me from my childhood.
Next question is which we touched on again, but some people joined later. So, but Veronica is asking, do you often have an idea of which animals you'd like to mix, or does it come to you in the process of working?
I do sometimes have an idea, but a lot of it is so based on the specific forms I find. So like, if I say for instance, like I want to mix a dog with a bird. I still have to find the right dog and the right bird that are the correct size and fit together. And usually I want the like aesthetic to match properly so it makes sense. So I usually go in with just, I mean, as you saw, I have many figurines on hand. And so when I'm getting ready to make work, I'll get a lot of them out and start thinking and looking. And occasionally I'll find one and I'll realize that I need a specific piece. So, if I pull out like a really amazing cat and I think this cat would look great with horse legs and I don't have the right horse, I may go to eBay and shop around for
Yeah.
horses.
Um, M. Johnson, maybe they're planning a road trip, asked, what's the best thrift store state you've lived in?
Um, it's tough because it, it's always different. I mean, like LA's ceramics were often very picked through, but LA also had like a vast amount of just weird stuff that was in the thrift store, and so that was really wonderful. But
Because you need
Seattle,
other stuff too.
yeah, like stuffed toys, furniture. There's just tons of garbage in LA, but it lends itself really well to the way that I work. But I think that Seattle actually has some really, I don't know, I wouldn't say the stores specifically are that good, but it's the types of goods that are coming into the stores are pretty good. I think there's just an older generation of people here. And so like today I went to the thrift store and there were about 40 swans, because someone gave up their collection of swans, I assume, to move into like a retirement home or whatever. And so that's really been exciting for me being here, like getting to see those things come through. Austin didn't have very good thrift stores.
Hmm.
That's where I lived before I lived in LA. So yeah, right now, I mean, I think my top store site is
All
Washington.
right. Cool. So, the people who have joined from the beginning or later, either way. So, I haven't really given a. I guess I. So this show opened late August. It's in our first floor space, track 16, and the Bendix building. So we have our 10th floor space that we've been up there for 7 years, and this first floor space opened up in the spring. So anyway, but it's towards the end. So you've gotten a tour of the exhibition, but if you're in LA and you want to come by, we're open through Saturday, and then her exhibition gets de-installed for the next show. So if you want to come by, please come by soon. We also have now Bustamante's exhibition on the 10th floor that just opened. Like I said before, she's had two other exhibitions at Track 16, one three-person show and one. Oh, I'm forgetting. What was the name of your last show?
Creature Comfort.
Oh, yeah, there we go. And incredible installation in the main gallery. Really a lot of fun. But also we kind of did together. It was mostly you doing it, High Beams
The
was
furniture.
also presented. Yeah, it was also presented. One of my favorites of when you're lying on the floor like a dead bear skin
I
rug.
will I will explain that slightly, so people aren't terrified. Um, so I did in LA. I did have a really quite large studio space, bigger than the one I'm in now. And the thing that happens when I have bigger space is I start bringing more things into the space, because I can't stop. And so I started bringing in furniture because there's so much discarded furniture in LA. And then I started covering the furniture with I deconstructed stuffed animals. So I pulled all their stuffing out and then I put the stuffed animal skins onto the furniture. And so it was during COVID, so no one was allowed to really go out so much. And we had an art show on the roof of a parking garage that people could drive through. And I did an installation that was a living room setup, with my fur covered furniture. And I also wanted there to be a bearskin rug. I dressed myself in a in a bear suit that was, those gigantic teddy bears, pulled out all the stuffing, made a suit for myself. So you could see my feet and my arms sticking out. And then I laid down amongst the furniture and we had a little living room. I don't know if that made it better or worse, but that's what happened. I was trying to make it less scary, but now it just seems like I made it more scary.
That was pretty great. It was so odd that this idea of I mean, we were still filled with fear at that time, but people could drive through, and I was just really glad that no one got run over.
Yeah, like me, because I was on the ground. It was also 105 degrees that day. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, that's so maybe I'll go back to stuffed animals someday. I mean, like furniture seems to be coming back, or like at least mirrors and maybe little tables. Um, and I never know. Everything depends on what I find, so it's sort of a mystery to me, as well as everyone else.
Yeah. Well, here we are. We've gone an hour 15, a little longer than I even expected. So so glad so many of you got to see it. And it's just been such great. I've been, I was worried about, oh, it'll be, something like this to get it from Seattle. I was slightly worried. So, but it's great to know that we can keep working with Deborah without impossibilities of disaster on the in between the states. So,
Yeah,
um, thank
know,
you
I
all
know
for
a lot.
coming.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and please go see the show if you're in LA. I really
Yeah.
appreciate all of you that logged in to see me talk.
And if you're not in LA and you want to like look at these pieces closer, the website has full documentation of the exhibition and all the pieces. And if you even click in, you can see which works are still available because there are still works available. Some great pieces. So
Yeah,
yeah,
go
that
buy
part too.
plates.
Collect your work.
Yeah, buy yourself some plates. They're relatively affordable. And then if you follow me on Instagram, those links are in my bio, so you can just go click in there.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thank
Thanks,
you. Thank you,
everybody.
Deborah. As always, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right. Let's end this
Yeah,
thing. How do we do that?
we have to figure it out.
There we go. End. No. Oh, yep. Ending now. Bye, everybody.
Bye.